Thanks to Brilliant.org for sponsoring this video.
That's what's been happening.
Wow, time slipping.
Wait, you know that?
Yeah.
Hey, welcome back ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy. So the Loki Season 2 trailer has arrived and we need to talk about why Loki is doing this.
I've been pulled through time.
So there's actually a huge hint that was hiding in plain sight in this trailer that I think all but spells out exactly what is causing Loki to time slip. And a little later in the video, we're going to talk about an even wilder possibility that, if true, could fundamentally change the way that we view the Marvel multiverse.
This changes everything!
So, from what we can tell, time slipping is exactly what it sounds like, slipping through time. That's pretty obvious to anyone who's seen the trailer, but the real mystery is what happened to Loki in those final moments of Season 1 that has made him uncontrollably glitch throughout the time stream. Now, we have seen MCU characters travel to alternate timelines and universes before and never experienced this contorting vanishing act, or even the glitching that we've seen happen in Spider-Verse.
Don't get what?
Which we'll talk about in a bit. Now, it is worth mentioning that OB says he's seen time slipping before, but never within the TVA. So before we can diagnose why Loki is time slipping and how it's happening inside the TVA, we first need to explain what the heck time slipping even is. Loki says,
I've been pulled through time between the past and the present.
So if OB, a member of the TVA, has seen this before, I would venture to guess that it could be a side effect of traveling through time too many times. Perhaps he's seen TVA agents have these same symptoms when on missions across the sacred timeline. But remember, the TVA agents are also variants.
I was told that everyone who works at the TVA was created by the Timekeepers.
That's ridiculous. They're all variants, just like us.
So this means that time slipping could also occur to variants who attempt to live in timelines that they aren't from, after their home timeline has been pruned from existence.
Yeah, like how Sylvie was hiding out in all the apocalypse-i.
Apocalypse-i?
That's the plural of apocalypse.
I did not know that.
I just made it up.
Okay, so
Hey person, guess what I learned?
what?
Oh, I forgot.
Okay, so like I was saying...
Wait, I remember.
Okay, what is it?
Did you know that when Samuel L. Jackson was in Star Wars, he had George Lucas write bad MFer on his lightsaber like his wallet in Pulp Fiction?
No, Doug, that's not true. That's an urban myth.
No, it's one of those things that can never be explained, like hurricanes.
Dude, what are you talking about? Hurricanes are when high pressure air enters a low pressure area and then the warm air starts to rise, which causes the air to swirl.
Wow, person, how'd you know all that?
Well, I learned that and many other scientific principles from Brilliant.org. They're the sponsor of this video. Brilliant is great for understanding big things like hurricanes or regular household items like how toilets work.
Don't even get me started on those mystery chairs.
Brilliant is a great way to challenge myself to learn something new every day, like math, science, or computer science. See, I was a terrible math student when I was in school. Maybe you were too. And I always felt like as an adult, I would never have the chance to learn about science and math. But Brilliant is great for teaching me to understand the world around us.
Yeah, but why would you even bother? You're a grown-up.
Because, Doug, learning math is challenging. But if I can learn math, then I can learn anything. And learning is a lifelong skill. You see, with Brilliant, you learn how to think. Brilliant uses these visual lessons to make them a fun 15-minute part of my morning routine. I mean, to learn anything, you've got to do it. Interactive learning is proven to be 6 times more effective than just passive learning, like just watching videos or reading. These are fun, short lessons that are built for busy people like us. I especially love logic problems and non-linear thinking puzzles, and these are built more like games than classroom lessons. You see, you're not just memorizing formulas or equations. Brilliant builds your intuition, so when you see a problem, you have the tools to solve it for yourself. With Brilliant, you learn how to think better. So to try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/ScreenCrush or click the link in the description below. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription.
And you will never learn how a toilet works.
Yeah, you will learn how a toilet works. Now back to what I was saying. Back to Loki time slipping. I think we could be asking the question all wrong. The question isn't why is Loki slipping through time, but why is time slipping through Loki?
I don't get it.
The trailer even contains a massive hint about what's happening to the God of Mischief. In this trailer, we saw Sylvie in a record store, and we can even see a record beginning to unravel.
So what's so special about records? Are you a vinyl guy now?
Doug, I have always been a vinyl guy, and records are a perfect representation of the sacred timeline and how it works. The various songs on the record's groove represent the various streams of time within the sacred timeline. So when you look at the sacred timeline, you can see every moment in the past, present, and future all occurring at once. Just like when you look at a record, you can see every groove that contains every sound wave of every song on this record. And in the center of the record, you find a hole for a record player spindle, the thing that makes the record spin. Just like how at the center of the sacred timeline, you'll find He Who Remains, who keeps the sacred timeline spinning.
So how does Loki play into that?
Well, Loki is the needle. On a record player, the needle doesn't spin around the record, it simply travels on a straight path across the record from start to finish. And it's the record itself that spins beneath that needle. And that's really how time works for everyone. The flow of time is just that, a flow, and we're merely observers watching as time sails by. So remember how season 1 ended. Loki and Sylvie finally came face to face with He Who Remains. Now He Who Remains tells them all about the multiversal war and how without him and the TVA, far worse versions of himself would rise to power.
If you think I'm evil, well, just wait till you meet my variants.
Sylvie doesn't buy it and still wants He Who Remains dead, but Loki fears he could be telling the truth.
Or you're a liar.
Sylvie, hang on a moment. Let's just talk about it.
But then they pass the threshold, the point where He Who Remains no longer knows what's going to happen in the timeline. At this point, the threshold is going to be very important for later. So Loki and Sylvie duel it out, but Sylvie gets the upper hand and sends Loki back to the TVA. She then kills He Who Remains and the multiverse devolves into madness. And when Loki finds Mobius and tells him what's coming, this happens. So now, Loki is unique because he is not of this new timeline. When they passed the threshold in the season 1 finale, Loki was not on the timeline. He was standing outside of time. And now, like the needle on a record player, Loki has been plopped down into the middle of a song that is playing on a very unstable record.
Oh, that's interesting. Why is the record unstable?
Well, Doug, the sacred timeline is now unraveling, meaning that the record is no longer flowing smoothly, and the structure of reality has become wibbly-wobbly, like an unstable turntable. You can even see this in the trailer. The records in the record store are unraveling. The individual grooves are tearing apart, just like how the timelines are splitting apart. And Loki, who is jumping around, feels every little bump. You can even think of each time slip as a needle scratch.
Hey, I didn't want to say anything before, but I'm 3 years old and I do not know how records work.
Sorry, you're right. So when a vinyl record has a scratch on it, it causes the needle to skip over the same part of the song, over and over and over, just like Loki is caught in a time-slipping loop. Now sometimes these skips are brief and just send you back a second in the record, but sometimes they're very long and can send you to a completely different song, or in Loki's case, to a completely different moment or location in time and space. So when he does the brief time slip, it's like a small record scratch, but when he runs into himself from a completely different time and place, that is like a huge record scratch. The channel New Rockstars pointed out that as Loki warps and jolts, you can see him reacting to the jolt before it happens, causing a sort of closed loop, like a record scratch, or like an Ouroboros.
An Ouroboros?
An Ouroboros. It is basically a circular symbol that's meant to represent infinite loops, just like a record. So this record parallel perfectly resembles what's causing Loki to time slip. But the real question is, why is it happening within the TVA? According to OB,
It's impossible to time slip in the TVA.
so ever since Loki season 1 ended, fans have been debating on whether or not time has been completely rewritten to where Loki and Mobius never met, or if Loki was sent to a completely different TVA than the one that he came from. Now, both of these theories seem impossible considering the rules of MCU time travel,
Changing the past doesn't change the future.
as well as how time works different in the TVA.
Time passes differently here in the TVA.
But this trailer revealed that these rules apparently are not set in stone. First, let's touch on the theory that this is a completely different TVA than the one that Loki originally came from. I don't think this theory is true, but I promised Colton that I would entertain it.
Thank you.
Shut up. So there's only supposed to be one TVA for the entire sacred timeline, which is basically a finite and contained multiverse. That's why in some realities Loki can be born a woman. But what if this is not the only self-contained multiverse?
Now do you say what now?
Well, what if the unwinding of the sacred timeline opened a door for Loki to be sent to another multiverse? A multiverse that neighbors the one that Loki came from. If true, this would mean that the MCU exists within what's called an omniverse.
And I'm no what?
An Omniverse, a collection of multiple multiverses.
Explain, please.
Okay, so in the season finale, we saw 2 black holes. And when we go into this one on the right, we are taken to the sacred timeline, possibly implying that the sacred timeline exists within that one black hole. And if that's the case, then that begs the question, what's in that other black hole? Another sacred timeline and another TVA? If that's the case, that could mean that the sacred timeline is not really a multiverse, but merely one single universe. And within that single universe, there are multiple flows of time that aren't other universes, but merely alternate dimensions within the same single universe. You see, the Ms. Minutes Explainer video warns that unchecked variant timelines will result in a multiverse. The warning sign even reads, "Danger, multiverse," as if to imply that the sacred timeline, when kept in check, is not a multiverse, but a single universe that risks becoming a multiverse. Now, sure, this could be chalked up to Ms. Minutes and the TVA being liars, but think about it. We never see the TVA travel to bizarre realities where everything is animated or all paint.
Were we paint in one of them?
That could be because those universes are actually other universes with their own timelines, meaning that the sacred timeline we know only consists of realities that stem from the mainline MCU. This theory is also supported by this shot in Quantum Mania. We see this circular flow of time that looks like the sacred timeline. Kang then has another ring of time appear above the first ring. We now have what looks like 2 separate sacred timelines stacked on top of each other, just like He Who Remains described stacked universes right here.
He was a scientist, and he discovered that there were universes stacked on top of his own.
So it's possible, however unlikely, that Loki is time-slipping because he has entered a different sacred timeline from his own, and that the variant timelines he's traveled to before were within that same sacred timeline. Therefore, they have the same laws of physics and nobody is paint, because the atoms of all those timelines derived from the same Big Bang and don't cause glitching.
Glitching? No. Why would you even say that?
So how did Loki get to this other black hole universe that's on the left?
Well, remember, before Sylvie sent Loki back to the TVA and killed He Who Remains, the sacred timeline was already breaking apart. They'd already passed the threshold.
We just crossed the threshold.
So by the time Sylvie pushes Loki through the time portal, sending him back to the TVA, a door between those 2 black holes could have opened because the universes were already colliding. This would have caused Loki to get sent back to the wrong TVA, a TVA that is also experiencing a cataclysmic situation of its own because these 2 black holes are beginning to collide.
When the boundary between 2 universes erodes and they collide, destroying one or both entirely.
This reality collapsed in on itself.
So Loki being in a completely different TVA would explain why Mobius didn't recognize him and why there's a giant Kang statue in place of the Timekeepers. But the big problem with that theory is we've already seen what happens when people from one universe enter another. They glitch, like in Spider-Verse. And that glitching looks very different from time slipping.
Do it.
It's okay.
I've been pulled through time.
Hold on, Dr. Strange and America Chavez didn't glitch, neither did the Peters Parker.
That's true, and actually that's why I think that glitching is caused by the way spider people travel across the multiverse. Something about their technology is unstable. Hence why 2099 tech and Across the Spider-Verse is able to stabilize the glitches.
Actually makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. So all of that is possibility number 1 for time slipping. But I think the most likely reason plays more into the theory that we mentioned before, that the TVA is experiencing time being rewritten. So going back to our record analogy, the entirety of the multiverse has found itself in chaos. Multiple versions of Kang are rising to power throughout various points in time. So what if this different TVA is not an additional TVA, but the same one being rewritten and rewritten over and over again, sort of like a whiteboard being erased or a VHS tape being recorded over time and time again?
But why would the TVA be affected by what's happening in the outside world? Doesn't it exist outside the flow of time?
Well, we just always assume that, but it's never been confirmed. All we really know is that
Time passes differently here in the TVA.
and that things like time slipping aren't supposed to be possible in the TVA, yet here we are.
We just saw it happen.
I think the TVA appeared to be outside of time because we've only ever seen it when it was under the rule of one Kang variant, He Who Remains. But with him dead and countless other Kangs coming to power, whatever space this is that the TVA exists within, it's now being tapped into and rewritten by multiple Kangs. In other words, all across different timelines, different Kangs are taking over and starting their own TVAs, hence why the TVA is being erased over and over again. This would explain why in this shot we see the statue of Kang the Conqueror that we saw in the season 1 finale, but in this scene we see a statue of Kang's head still hidden behind a mural of the Timekeepers. Like the sacred timeline, the TVA is in chaos and constantly changing. And this once again brings us right back to why Loki is time slipping in the TVA. Like the wibbly wobbly record player causing a needle to bounce around the surface of a record, there is an unstable TVA being jerked around in every direction, and Loki is the only one feeling the effects of it. Basically, he's Marty McFly.
Oh, I've got to hear this.
Well, think about it. In Back to the Future or most other time travel movies, the time traveler is often the only one who remembers the alternate timeline. Like, imagine if time travel really existed and there were time travelers constantly changing the past. We would never know it. Like, one minute you'd be watching this video and the next you'd be like a cowboy with no idea that your whole existence had just changed. The same thing could be happening to the TVA, but because Loki and Sylvie were present at the threshold, they exist outside of these changes. It's the same thing with Loki. He's from the previous timeline, and now that timeline has fallen into chaos and is being rewritten again and again and again by all these other Kangs. So Loki and possibly Sylvie are the only ones aware of the calamity that is currently unfolding.
It's the end of the world. Have a drink with us.
In other words, Loki is not the one slipping through time. Like the needle of a record player, he stays in the same place, but the record itself, or time, is slipping around him.
Person, I said it before and I'll say it again. I miss those tasty looking rainbow rocks.
Those were simpler times, but theories like this are a lot of fun. So I want to hear from you guys. Do you think Loki is going to multiple universes, multiple multiverses? What do you think time slipping is? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, hey, welcome. Please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.